Hello everybody and welcome to the Great Guild Wars 2 Countdown. The footage in the background for today comes from Croatian Maniacs, so thank you very much to you and your wonderful, wonderful username. I'm actually recording this less than 12 hours after yesterday's went up because I left it a ridiculously long amount of time before uploading, and funnily enough, yesterday I said, oh, there's not been much news, guys. There's actually been loads of news because during the course of that day, ArenaNet decided to put loads of stuff out. So here we go for the news. This is stuff that's going on. First of all, on, I can't say the blog anymore, it's kind of weird, on guildwars2.com's news section, I'll have to get used to saying that now, ArenaNet have released two new articles, if you will. The first one is titled The Final Countdown, Guild Wars 2 Launch Times. So they have now explicitly written out there for you guys exactly what time Guild Wars 2 will be launching for everyone in different situations. So if you've pre-purchased, it will tell you exactly when you can get in with your 3-day head start. If you've pre-ordered, it will tell you with your 1-day head start. And if you've done neither, then it will just tell you when the game launches, which will be when this countdown ends too. They also remind everybody, and I'll remind you too, to just get the client already and just keep it updated, because you can use that exact same client if you've been in stress tests or betas at the moment when the game launches too. Speaking of which, another bit of exciting news is another stress test today. No, it's not like a half an hour stress test. I thought it'd be quite funny if ArenaNet kept making them smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller to see how many people would actually go in. No, this one's 4 hours. It's back to a 4-hour long stress test. Very cool. This will be going on, I'm pretty sure, okay, 8 o'clock my time. So that's going to be noon for them again. But last stress test I thought started at noon on the west coast, and then I ended up turning up an hour late. Anyway, so it's 4 hours. It will be starting at either 7 or 8 my time. If you want to be prepared for it, then once again, just make sure your client is fully updated. This could be, I'm getting sick of saying this, but this could be one of our last chances to get into Guild Wars 2, but who knows? Who knows? There could be countless more stress tests after this. So just so that you're aware, there is another one going on in case you missed some of the more recent ones. Also, on the ArenaNet news section of their website, they put out another article entitled Introducing the Worlds of Guild Wars 2. So this is the final list of every server that will be available in Guild Wars 2 at the launch of the game. So we've had numerous revisions of it. You had kind of the first beta where there were a few, then you had the second beta where there were tons and tons, and then the third where they cut it back down, and now this is the final list right here. I'm not sure, I think some of the servers might have been cut out from what we were seeing in previous stress tests, maybe. I've seen a few people talking about that, saying, oh, we need to pick a different server now. I'm not 100% sure on that though, but if I were you guys, you can look in the description of this video, you'll find a link to this, and just be sure that wherever you've settled on going is there. Just to clarify, I'm going to be on Emery Bay. It took me a while to kind of decide this, but that's where my guild's going to be, so we're all going to be hanging out on Emery Bay. That's a question I get quite often, actually. So, yeah, but don't forget, though, you do have a week after the game launches to change what server you may or may not be on, where it's completely free to have those transfers, so don't feel like you're too locked in when the game first comes out and you might be on a different server. What I quite like about this list is you can kind of see what they're expecting their player bases to be. Guild Wars 1, it was no secret that a massive chunk of the Guild Wars 1 player base and community really were in Germany. That was a massive, massive market for Guild Wars 1. And you can kind of see here as well, there are more German servers than there are French servers. And there's only one Spanish server, but hey, at least there is a Spanish server. So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, as I say, link in the description if you want to check it out for yourself. Also, lastly, there's been, I don't want to say it, but some people have been talking about it and bitching a tiny bit, I suppose. Remember how I said that ArenaNet would be at Gamescom? Actually, if you do go there, they said it would just be a bit of a chill-out thing before, but if you are at Gamescom, you want to go to ArenaNet, follow them on Facebook or Twitter. Every day they're going to be announcing a password, and if you if you just say this password to one of the members of ArenaNet at Gamescom, they'll actually give you a code that gives you a unique in-game item. What that item is, I'm not sure. I don't think that they've said whether it's a mini pet, which I maybe expect them to have done, or whether it's some kind of unique gear or something. I think that's quite cool. There were some people saying, oh, how comes these guys, just because they get to go to Gamescom, get the chance to get all these items, blah, 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 as you'd expect. But I think it's quite cool, and I really would recommend, if you are around there, get yourself one, because just think about it, in a couple of years, this will be a pretty crazy item, especially if they don't offer us any other way to get it. It'll be a very, very, very cool thing to have. So yeah, that's going on at Gamescom, and I'm wondering now also whether that'll be going on at their other expos and events and stuff going forward, but they've not said anything to that point just yet. But yeah, there you go, guys. That's the newsy-ish stuff for today. Moving on to the questions. Cruiser LCK, or Cruiser Lock I suppose that's supposed to be, says, in Lion's Arch in the Eastern Ward there are 6 unfinished Asura gates. They are roughly the same distance from the centre of the Grand Piazza as the 5 gates that lead to the current playable racist cities. Seeing how they're similarly located to this central area of Lion's Arch, it would seem that maybe there are 6 more races to come in the future. If you talk to the Asura crew leader there, he talks about not being able to talk about some of the construction and mentions an NDA. I feel that ArenaNet might have something to pull out of their hat after release regarding these pretty much already built Asura gates and nicely decorated area. They even went as far as giving the crew leader dialogue vaguely pertaining to those gates. Have you seen them? Have any speculation as to what may walk out of these gates one day? I did see them. I was very excited when I first saw them. This is definitely something that ArenaNet have set up to allow them room for expansions in the future and to tease us and to say to us, oh look, we've got more plans. Definitely, there is no doubt in my mind about it. They are so conveniently located near the actual 5 in-use Asura gates we've got at the moment. It's just almost impossible to imagine that they're not eventually going to plan for these to also activate as expansions come out. Now, what the interesting question to me is really there are 2 things. First, where will they go, I suppose is a good question. I'm sure one of them will go to the Dominion of Winds whenever that becomes accessible to us, and where the Tengu are currently living. And I'm sure as these other regions unlock, there'll be Asura gates to them too. Places like the Fire Island chain, perhaps, the Crystal Desert, and even areas in the other 2 continents, Cantha and Alona, will probably have Asura gates. I mean, in Guild Wars 1, we saw that both Cantha and Alona did have Asura gates there on them. It's just the link between them was severed when we went through at the start of Eye of the North, where we blew up one of the gates to stop the destroyers from travelling through and finding us. So there are definitely gates around there. The networks, though, if we're going to talk about this from more of a lore perspective, the original Guild Wars 1 Asura Gate network might be very different to the Guild Wars 2 Asura Gate network as technology's been refined and stuff. So really, there is nothing conclusively that says we'll be able to link directly to those old Asura Gates that we saw in Guild Wars 1. But I am sure that as expansions come out, we will get more gates that can all be linked straight there through Lion's Arch. And what's a really quite cool idea, and I would recommend, by the way, if you haven't seen these, go check them out in the stress test. They're really close to the gates in Lion's Arch. You just walk sort of northeast-ish a bit, and you'll find them there. What's a really exciting thought to me is that in 3 or 4 years, a lot of the players will probably massing around that area of Lion's Arch, and on launch we'll probably be expecting a lot of activity right around those 5 gates we've got at the moment and the Mystic Forge and so forth. But it will probably shift eventually as more and more of these gates unlock. What I think is quite an interesting discussion to be had, though, is whether every single region that ArenaNet add is going to have a gate of its own. Do they really need a gate in the Crystal Desert when we've got Evenhawk so close to the Crystal Desert and there's already a gate there? Do we need one everywhere? I mean, they're actually, if you think about it, quite sparse already in Guild Wars 2 in terms of the amount of land and places we can go to, and the fact that really we've only got 5 and where they all connect to in Lion's Arch, and that's it, aside from the one that we've seen at the Vigil Keep, wherever that may end up going. So it's kind of an interesting thought to me whether they'll continue to add lots and lots of gates. There are certainly quite a few gates in that unused plaza at the moment. How many? There's definitely more than 5. Maybe there's probably less than 10 though. There's a fair few of them that are being constructed there. So does this mean though ArenaNet have got plans for everywhere every single one of them go, or are they just safeguarding themselves in the future, similar to how they were safeguarding themselves by not adding any cooking ingredients that involved fish, because they might want to add fishing at some point? Is it along those same lines, or do they really have it all planned out? There was a quote from the devs in an interview quite recently where they said, we have many plans and we know where we want to go with Guild Wars 2 after the launch. And really, that shouldn't come as a surprise. I mean, release is coming so closely now. They will have had a few meetings already about the future places that they're going to. There will have been members of their development team that might have been sat down. I mean, concept artists, their job's kind of over now. So what have they been concepting out for the past 3 or 4 months, or maybe even longer than that? Probably what they're planning on doing for expansions. It's curious, though, where these gates will go. Really, we're just talking about what they're going to do with expansions at this point. How much of the expansion content is going to be in big boxed games that come out once every 2 years, and how much is going to be patches that just add new regions in? We don't know. But yeah, these Asura gates are very exciting. I wonder how long it will take for them all to be activated and to come in use. I mean, for all we know, really, maybe they're just planning that as soon as we get to Cantha, there's going to be, say, 5 regions in Guild Wars 2's Cantha, and each of those is going to have a gate, and all of a sudden, in just one fell swoop with that one expansion, this entire plaza in Lion's Arch is just going to be devoted to getting different areas of Cantha really quickly. That could happen as well. So yeah, I mean, very exciting. I love seeing stuff like this. There's a place in the Brisbane Wildlands, if you guys haven't seen, where to the north, in like the north, kind of central Brisbane Wildlands to the north, you can actually see a load of bandits trying to build a bridge that's broken down. And you can walk right up to this bridge, and if you look across the bridge, there's actually a portal off in the distance that looks north towards like some new explorable area, but that is nowhere that's marked on the map, and it's definitely not an in-game region. So this is once again them teasing us about things that will be coming after launch, and I do very much believe this is after launch, not something they're going to pull out of their hat and be like, oh look at all this extra stuff that really we haven't talked about here, boom. I don't expect that kind of thing to happen. I think we know a bit too much from data mining and stuff at this point to really be smart about expecting any surprises like that. So don't hold out, but maybe on launch ArenaNet will come out with some kind of post talking about continued development of the game. I mean, it won't be too long before they tell us exactly what their plans are, surely. The next question comes from Alex, who says, hey, I've watched just about all of your videos, but I don't particularly remember a video going into the lore of either the Inquest or the Nightmare Court. The Nightmare Court was mentioned in a recent video, but I don't remember much about the Inquest. I'm going to be maining an Asura, so I'd like to know if you have any knowledge, if there is any, about the Inquest or of deeper lore about the Nightmare Court. We have talked quite a lot about the Nightmare Court recently. They're probably, I said recently that every playable race has got kind of a negative faction, a faction that we can fight. The Nightmare Court, to me, are probably the most interesting out of all of the races. They've got the most compelling story. They're the most reasonable, I would say. You can see why they've turned to Nightmare, especially if you read the story about Cadian and all of his thoughts on the tablet and why they'd go against it. It does seem very sound, and I do very much enjoy the Nightmare Court. Well, then I would put also the Inquest for the Asura as the second most relatable beneath that, because these guys really, they have the same agenda as us. They don't like the Elder Dragons, and they want to fight the Elder Dragons just as much as we do. It's just they have a very specific, very corporate, very worrying structure to the way they're going about this, where they just don't care about morals or ethics. I suppose if you want to boil it down to one sentence about the Inquest, that's basically what it comes down to. They don't care. They don't give a shit about sacrificing people, and they have particularly interesting methods when it comes to how they disperse information. So, as you know, Asura primarily work in crews, right? They band small teams together to work on a certain project, and when the project is done, they'll move off onto other projects, and sometimes they'll form partnerships, and the two of them will go into the same crew the next time, and so forth. But the Inquest, think of them as just a giant crew. Asura don't typically do this kind of thing, but the Inquest is really just a massive crew, where the individuals within the Inquest don't actually know why necessarily they're working on what they are working on, or what their findings and research means. It's set up in such a way that all information that is gathered by the Inquest, this massive crew, is kind of filtered up through this giant pyramid scheme to the people at the top that are trying to use this information primarily, I suppose, to fight the Elder Dragons, but to a lesser extent as well, maybe even a greater extent, to take control of the Eternal Alchemy, which is the Asura's idea of how the entire universe works. So on some level you could say that the Inquest are trying to take over the universe, but I feel like that kind of comes secondary to the threat of the Elder Dragons with the Inquest at this point. But what's so worrying and cool about the Inquest is you have these individual Asura that are working for the Inquest and seeking something more for themselves and gathering this information, but they don't necessarily know in what context this information is being used, and it's just slowly being fed up until no one really knows what's going on, or how dangerous the Inquest is being, except the guys at the top. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we actually know much about those people at the top either, who they are. They just seem to be very mysterious, very in the background, and there could be a lot of interesting stories that go on there with those guys at the top of the Inquest that I guess we'll see as we play through Asura characters for ourselves. I haven't actually played any personal story on my Asura at this point, and even if we had in the stress test and the betas, we can't get that far into it anyway. But yeah, they're very interesting. I quite like the Inquest. There is more information definitely on them. Again, if you look at the blog posts, both the Nightmare Court and the Inquest probably got, I would say, in one big batch, the most lore came out about them during their respective race week, during the development of Guild Wars 2 a while ago. When they did like Asura week, there were a lot of posts about the lore of the Asura and the Inquest, and the same with the Sylvari and the Nightmare Court. So that is, again, I've got to stop plugging my own stuff, but again, there is a big playlist with all that stuff if you want to learn more. Anyway, there you go, guys. That's the great Guild Wars 2 countdown for today. I'm going to shut it off here. I'm going to have fun in the stress test later today. I hope you guys do as well, and I will see you tomorrow for another day closer to the launch of Guild Wars.